So thanks everyone for coming down. Most of you know me from around the community. And about 6 or 7 months ago, in that period of time, we're seeing in the newspapers some really severe DV happening. I grew up seeing the exact same things that these women were seeing and these kids were seeing, and always thought to myself, what can I do now to try and do something to stop that rising tide of domestic violence? And been involved in boxing my whole life, and to be able to give back and give free lessons for women and girls, you're in good hands.
It's just a bloke telling a story. I think being able to tell that story as a man and open other men's eyes that it's okay to talk about that, I think that's really important.
Sexual assault that's committed by someone you're in a domestic relationship with.
It was really good to hear somebody else go through sort of the same things that I did.
Your focus on men's mental health in light of the horrific statistics about Australian men and suicide is so important. But you have a right to be angry with me. You have that right.
Yeah, I'm not angry, Mum. I held that guilt my whole life because I couldn't protect you. I'm a lucky man. I have 4 kids and a beautiful wife, Kate. I live a happy life now, but what people don't know is just how much violence it took to get here. Hi, my name's Darryl Gardiner and I'm here to tell my story. I was born in 1983. My mum, she was only 15 when she became pregnant, and when she came home and announced that news, her mum said to her, you know, we're going to kill this baby. You're an embarrassment to our family. I'll get the neighbour over, we'll hold you down and we'll kick you over again until you miscarry. So obviously I don't remember those things, but the impact of those words is still, you know, very heavy to me now. My mum was 15, my dad was 19. My old he's a good guy, but at that stage he was just a kid as well and wasn't around. When I turned 2, and she'd met this other person that took away the next 3 to 4 years of her life. What happened there was a really quick journey, if you like, an express train almost. From love and affection to abuse, daily domestic violence. She had to stay inside, she had to stay isolated. She'd stand up and she'd say, you know, you can't do this. I don't want to be treated like this. You know, she was brave, she was courageous. When she began to challenge that physical abuse, her perpetrator then very quickly went to the next step, which was daily sexual abuse. She'd be raped, brutalised, you know, have knives held up to her, and set about to show her that she was owned, that she was the property of someone else, and that that person could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted.
Did you hear those things happen?
Yeah. Those things became such a common occurrence, those sounds, the screams, the bangs, the thuds, skin breaking, skin tearing. It just became normal, and I thought to myself, this is what a family's probably like. I remember we went to the swimming pool one day. You know, a lot of DV perpetrators, they like to put the happy family on, get the missus, get the kid, we'll go down to the pool and everyone will think I'm a good guy. And I remember getting kicked into the pool and being scared because I couldn't swim and being told, you know, don't be a fucking sook, get in the pool. The message there was really clear, you know, if I can do this to you here at a pool, imagine what I can do to you at home when nobody's watching. My mum, she finally got the courage to leave, and we found another place. I was asleep one night and, my mum was taking a bath and he came in through the window and climbed into the bathtub with her, took his pants off and proceeded to rape her in the bath. And he was saying over and over again to her while he raped her, "If you want to run away from me, I'll kill you to make sure nobody else can have you." I remember trying to get in between and trying to protect my mum. I was bashed again myself and told, I'll kill you as well. And, I thought I was going to die then. I thought we were both going to die. I guess that put us on to the next phase of our lives because, while he didn't kill Mum or I in that instance, he did go on to kill someone else and went to jail. When the abuser was in jail, my mum met the next person in her life. Fortunately for her and fortunately for me, the man that she met then, my stepdad, Ken, he was the sort of man that I wish we had in our life a lot earlier, He was kind, he was fair, he was loving. What he did was he showed my mum that there was room for love and there was room for relationships that weren't based on fear. So I grew up from the age of about 5 to 10, having this really happy life. There was so much happiness, I was so lucky. But there was also so much confusion, because I thought to myself that I must be mental. I also believed that the violence would come back, and that this would not last forever. One day after school, I must have been about 10. I come across a PCYC and I wandered in and, the smell of the leather, the sweat, it was intoxicating, So I stuck a pair of gloves on and started to move around and do what I thought a boxer would do. And I started to go back there, every day because it was an outlet for my anger. I was the youngest person there at the time. The other guys were like early teens, mid-teens and grown men. And I thought, these are men that are using violence, but it's not scary. It's controlled. I used to think maybe I could be like that. Maybe I can use boxing as a way to get out of the hurt that I'm in. I guess I'd almost found my place for a while and, the next little bit of time was okay. Probably around the age of about 12, I sort of started to push to go and live with my dad. I think that's a bit of a rite of passage for young men too, in a way. I've seen that happen now over and time again. And you always think the grass is greener on the other side. It was pretty full on living with Dad. At that stage, he was the toughest bloke I'd ever known. In amongst the chaos, all those ideas of what a man was were continuing to hurtle me along at, a really fast speed to the, man that I became shortly after that. The voices in my head kept saying to me, you're weak, you couldn't protect your mum. You're weak, you couldn't hurt her abuser. So you're worthless. Worthless because your own father couldn't say he loves you. And I started doing things, I started covering myself up, all those fucking bullshit tattoos, because I thought, I had this idea that, if I can be as ugly on the outside as I am on the inside, then no one will want to have a relationship with me. I won't have to be vulnerable. I'll never have to open up, which isn't safe. I thought, I need to become a monster because monsters don't get hurt and monsters do the hurting. And if I can become a monster, then I won't ever be in a position where I can be hurt again like I was as a kid. It was like peering into a crystal ball because almost like I knew it was going to come. Started to hurt people, started to, used power and control in my relationships with women. Started to become physical, push, grab, hit, choke. You know, doing the things that I had seen so much growing up, you know, and when I was turning into this person, you know, I was also turning into a person that I hated, you know. I knew that it was only going to finish up either dead or in jail. The last offence I ever committed was the big one. You know, I started out like any other Saturday night, out drinking, partying, you know, always on the lookout for that next fight, always on the lookout for the next person I could put all my hurt onto, put all that trauma onto, make them feel it instead of me. And we're outside a pub and you know, verbal altercations soon turned into a physical altercation, and such a regular thing to me that I didn't even bat an eyelid.
You think you almost killed him?
Yeah, and yep. And at that time, I just didn't see anything wrong with that, you know. I've been running this race for so long, you know. I was that fatigued from this life that I had lived, but I'd really gotten into that, I guess, that phase of my life where I'd gone from victim to offender. And I don't remember the act, but I woke up with cuts in my arms, where I tried to hurt myself. Then when I come around in the hospital, I said, I need to stay here because I need help. And I don't know where to go. I didn't even know what a psychiatrist was at that stage. And what he said to me next stuck with me for the last 18 years. He said to me, no, we're going to discharge you today because you don't meet our criteria for admission. And he said, you're not mentally ill. And he said, you're just ultra violent and hospital's not the place for you, but jail is. That was rock bottom for me. I started to think, how can I help people instead of hurt people? And I thought to myself, there's a lot of misguided kids that I was seeing around at that time. So I started to do different things. I started to coach some kids with some boxing, and I started to think maybe the violence that I'd used my whole life can be used for something positive.
They should have like a strap there, it's easier.
After that last offence, you know, I deserved what was coming my way. When I went in for sentencing, the magistrate said to me that I can see you doing the right thing, and I can see something in you, you know, that if it's harnessed, it can change the world. And he said, but if it's left unharnessed, it'll kill someone. I'm prepared to give you another chance. I'll suspend that sentence. But if you ever come back before me again for another offence involving violence, and based on your track record, it's probably likely you will, you won't get another chance. I'll throw the book at you. A little bit further down the track, my oldest boy, Tyson, would have been about 4 at that time. He was living with me. His mum wasn't around. You know, I was doing really good then. I was working. You know, I was doing my best as a single dad. You know, I remember having to do a course, 6 individualised sessions. So I went off to see this male counsellor because I thought I'll be, you know, if I have to talk to somebody, I'll feel safer talking to a man. A man will understand me better for sure. And so I went off, and I still had all that noise in the back of my head, all that chatter about therapy's bullshit, it's not safe, things like that. But I thought, no, I have to do this because this is for my son, it's not for me now, I have to do it for him. So I went in, I sat down. The counsellor said to me, pretty standard counselling question, tell me why you're here. And you know, for the first time in 28 years, I was 28 at that stage, I started to cry, you know, because everything came out of me. And I started to cry really heavily, you know, and You know, the counsellor looked at me and he said to me, "Are you crying?" He said, "Fuck. I've never seen anyone with tats cry before." And started to laugh to himself. And I don't know if that was his fucked up way of trying to build a rapport with me. But for somebody like me who, you know, who needed help so badly, who was still lost in a way, everything came back to the front of my mind. Like, see, this is what happens when you talk about your feelings. You get made to look like a fucking idiot. This is what happens when you be vulnerable. You get dickheads like this that laugh at you because you're crying, you know. Every negative association with any kind of therapy that I'd built up in my brain came flooding out. So I got up, you know, and I thought, I'm going to hurt this guy. I'm going to go back to doing exactly what I know how to do and exactly what makes me feel powerful and you feel like the weak person. And I leaned over to the desk and I went to jam him, and I thought to myself, I thought of little me hiding in the chair, cowering in the chair just like he was as I was getting the fuck beaten out of me when I was a kid. But that's when I thought, yeah, I can't ever use violence again. I can never use violence again. I spoke to one of the guys at the gym and he'd just come out of jail. He had to see a psychologist as part of his parole. And he'd been talking about him at the gym and he'd been saying how good he was, so I got his number. And I went in and I signed up for the 6 sessions I had to do. And 6 sessions turned into about 3.5 years of therapy. For the first time ever, someone sat with me and they put a hand on my shoulder and they said to me, "Hey, you know what happened to you when you were a kid and what you saw and the fact you couldn't save your mum? It wasn't your fault." Because I still held so much guilt and shame over that in my stomach for not being able to save her, and to have somebody tell me it wasn't my fault and actually believe them. For me, that was one of the, you know, life-changing moments. But then what he said in the next breath was, "But what you did to other people when you grew up, the way you hurt other people because of that trauma, that is your fault. And you have to own that. You have to make that right."
Do you own it?
Yeah, I didn't at the time. But as we kept working together, it was almost like he read my mind, because we kept coming back to that and he'd ask me that question, same question you just asked me. Are you owning it yet? Are you owning it yet? And finally one day I said, yeah, I am. And he said, what does it look like? And I said, it looks like so much fucking remorse. So much guilt. So much regret for a wasted life. But so much hope for the future without that weight around my neck anymore. "14 years ago, I met my wife, Kate. She stuck solid with me through my healing and was the one who convinced me this story needed to be told. We were visiting my hometown about 12, 15 months ago. I knew that things had come full circle and I faced the biggest test of my life. I pulled up out the front of the supermarket. There's only one little supermarket in the town where I'm from, and went in and got some drinks and lined up. You know, and I looked over and I seen this guy lining up there to buy a bottle of bourbon, and I thought to myself, I know you, I just can't put my finger on it. And he looked at me, he knew that I knew him, but I didn't know who he was. And then he broke the gaze and he looked at the ground and he started to pay for his stuff really quickly. And he ran out of the shop, and I thought, that's a piece of shit from my childhood. All that stuff that I'd worked so hard to heal, all that trauma, all that anger and hurt and pain, it just came up into my throat. And I remembered that promise that I'd made to myself as a little boy, that I'd kill him if I ever got a chance to, and I thought, well, now's your chance. And so I put the things down on the counter and I started to make my way towards the door, and I looked again, I looked at my family in the car, and I thought, I'm really lucky. I had a beautiful family I never thought I deserved. I got love that I never thought I would deserve. I watched my family, and I thought, That's never, ever, ever going to be the answer for you again. Violence is never going to be the answer for you again. As we drove off, you know, looking in the rearview mirror of my hometown, that chapter of my life was behind me. I'd moved into working in mental health because I had two things that were burning in my mind. And they were what the psychiatrist had said to me all those years earlier, that I didn't fit the criteria for help because I was violent. And the other counsellor laughing at me for crying. And I thought, if I ever get to mental health as a worker, I'll do better than that. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the fact we're meeting here on Aboriginal land. As a Wiradjuri man from southwestern New South Wales, it's my honour to be here, back here.
I heard Darryl's story and I've invited him to come down and talk to the boys today. As Darryl comes in and speaks to them, you might not have the most in-depth conversation with them at the time, but what it does is plant seeds and just puts a crack in the door for the rest of us workers, as youth workers, counsellors, psychologists that are within the centres, to actually walk through that door that he's cracked open for us, because he has the ability to do so through his lived experiences.
I mean, I'd had this idea drilled into my brain from such a young age that violence was the answer to everything.
That makes the boys vulnerable. That makes them comfortable, feel safe. So they actually want to talk about it and they want to help themselves.
Cheers, bro.
Thanks, bro. Boy, how did you last, like, seeing that level? Like, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
It was hard, bro. But I knew, you know, I couldn't ever do anything like that again. I couldn't ever act like that again like I used to, because as soon as I did that, that whole life that my wife and I fought so hard to build just goes straight out the window, you know, and being around and watching my kids grow up was so much more important to me than trying to settle that old score in a physical way. Yeah. And then that was over. And I could let that go.
Yeah, you're a strong man, bro.
Thank you, my brother. I'll take care.
What he showed is that there's two ways about it. You can go this way or that way. You know, you can keep doing that, you know, but you will essentially get nowhere. Whereas that way, there's more to life. That's what his whole talk was about, essentially. He stayed true to his values, as he said, you know, the counsellors, and he's never gonna use violence again. And, but for me, bro, that's powerful, cause you know, that's real man shit.
It's just a bloke telling a story. It's not about being Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, what social class you come from, any of that. It's just a man telling his story, and I think everyone needs to hear it. It opens your eyes to what not only children and women go through, and there's that awareness of now of what goes on behind closed doors, that silent rape that is so hidden.
What they call silent rape, and that's sexual assault that's committed by someone you're in a domestic relationship with.
I think being able to tell that story as a man and open other men's eyes that it's okay to talk about that, and it doesn't emasculate him as a man to be able to tell that story.
I reckon I've talked to 5,000 men since I started doing this work, and I can count on one hand the amount of men that have said that they felt like therapy was a safe place for a man. I can count on no fingers how many of those men said that, you know, they had a good male role model growing up.
Your focus on men's mental health in light of the horrific statistics about Australian men and suicide is so important. You can give yourself a pat on the back, darling, for addressing it. That reminds me of a story I heard once of people being thrown into the river, What do? Do you keep pulling the victims out of the river, or do you go and stop the person who's chucking them in? And that's what you're doing, darling. You're stopping the people who are throwing them into the river. You're amazing. We've both used our experiences for the good of others. You have and I have. I decided to write books because I was literate.
Yeah.
When I held my first book in my hands, I thought, this is the most healing thing I've ever done.
You're very clever with that stuff, Mum. I'm very proud of you to be able to do that.
We're a mutual appreciation society. But you have a right to be angry with me. You have that right.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm not angry, Mum. You say you felt guilty because you didn't protect me. Well, I held that guilt my whole life because I couldn't protect you. There's nothing you can do when you're a little toddler to protect people, but I still felt that way, that I should have been able to do something.
Darling, I know, honey, I can relate.
Each time I tried to get in between and stop and think, it's just...
You were a baby, sweetie. You were the one. You couldn't make choices, I could.
I just wanted you to have a break.
And darling, I would have fucking killed the piece of shit.
There's a legion of men out there that, I was one of them. We weren't born violent. We were not biologically violent. We became violent because we were products of our environment. We need more men in things like men's behaviour change programs that are often facilitated by women, and they're facilitated by women for a very good reason, because women, and only women, can give that impact of what violence is like from a female perspective, and I know why women are there in those positions to run those programs, and I respect that. But we also need men standing up there beside them, because the same people that are bashing their partners are not respecting the women's voice. We went through that whole story that I've just told you guys. We need men keeping men accountable. We need men to be saying that the change has to start with us. So it has to start with men that know what it's like to be violent, because we have that insight into what it's also like to change.
For support on issues raised in this program, please contact the following services: 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. Men's Line Australia on 1300 789 978.